Hi, I'm Simon Kahan, a founder of the Cultivated Meat Modeling Consortium, or CMMC. I'm here to introduce why our growing community is using computer modeling to help accelerate bringing cultivated meat to market. Chris, who facilitates our community, will follow that introduction with more details around who we are and how we operate. And then Jaro, a member of the Netherlands Science Center, will talk more specifically about the what we have done this year and plan to do over the next couple of years. So why are we doing anything? Well, with overfishing depleting the oceans, animal agriculture polluting the air and water, and the demand for meat increasing, we clearly need to find some alternative to butchered meat, fish, and poultry, and we need to do this soon. To rely on voluntary reducitarianism seems incredibly risky. We can't even get enough people just to stay home for 2 weeks or to wear masks. And the jury is out as to whether plant-based meat will ever evolve into an acceptable substitute for more than a small fraction of meat eaters. It'd be great if it does. But the urgency of the situation requires we follow and accelerate progress along all possible paths, including cultivated meat. So how do we accelerate progress? Any individual effort, a research project, or company focuses their team on getting a product to the consumer market using their specific approach. It's like they're paddling a canoe, working together to get to shore as quickly as possible. We need to fully resource each team so it achieves its potential, but like canoes, that potential speed has a natural maximum. Paddle it harder, and a canoe just creates a lot of turbulence. Push researchers to go faster, and they just get ornery. So we, of course, direct additional resources towards additional projects. It becomes a race in that the faster teams will get the advantages of first to market in whatever their product niche. But again, there are diminishing returns from investing in many more teams. The best time in a race is not likely to reduce substantially beyond a modest number of qualified competitors. And we're not urgent to deliver to market quickly. We could quit here and watch the race. That is the usual way in the venture capital system. But there's a third thing we can do. We can intervene at the system level. We can do the equivalent of reducing the viscosity of the water, working with all the teams to move faster. To do that, we need two things: a transformative agent and the participation of the whole system. The transformative agent we have in mind is computational modeling. I'll introduce that briefly, and Jaro will pick it back up in more detail later. And a means for participation is the CMMC, our community. Chris will talk about that in a few minutes. So what do I mean that computer modeling is a transformative agent? Well, as an example, 30 years or so ago, designing an automobile took 18 months and involved crash testing prototypes, each one costing more than $300,000 to build. Computer simulations brought the cost down to about $5,000 per virtual prototype, and the total time down to 12 weeks. That's a cost reduction of about 50 times and a time to market reduction by over 6 times. The system participated readily. There are ample resources in this mature industry, and regulations calling for lighter yet safer products. In the cultivated meat field, we cannot afford to wait for that to happen. Unfortunately, models don't just happen. They are not just developed by modelers working in isolation and thrown over the fence to users, as is often the case for software. Rather, there's an intricate iterative process that requires participation of engineers, mathematicians, and scientists throughout. It begins with knowledge rules extracted by modelers from scientific literature. Modelers encode those rules into an initial model. Simulating that model reveals the implications of that knowledge, which, when compared with experimental results, typically invalidates the rules. The rules are refined, and we go around the cycle again and again until simulation and physical experiment match well enough that the model can be trusted to be predictive in some limited scenarios. So once predictive, the model can be used in an engineering sense to map process parameters to predictions of experimental outcomes that can then be compared to the desired product. And the discrepancies used to inform changes to product parameters. And then the cycle repeats to find optimal process parameters. course, we may slip back to the science loop again when those predictions fail to produce what we had hoped for. But overall, we expect that the model will encapsulate knowledge that's more and more accurate of the real world and more useful to engineers. To make them useful, we do have to answer a lot of questions requiring many areas of knowledge and expertise, and areas throughout engineering, science, math, and statistics are all relevant. What may be less obvious is that because a model is like a snowball, it accumulates knowledge and veracity as it rolls from one research project to another. There's far more value to any given project or company to contribute and use shared models than to go it alone. And these are the reasons it takes a village. It's both because we need a very broad, broad expertise, a lot of knowledge, a lot of experiments to be run. And then in addition, it makes sense for people to work together on this, even as competitors. So Chris will talk more about the CMMC itself, the community that we've created, and then Jaro will talk about what our nascent and growing village is up to. Thanks.
Thank you, Simon, for that. My name is Chris Clark. I'm here to share with you some of the principles that go into the design of the CMMC that we're proud of, things that have enabled our success over the last year to create a really a different way of collaborating and sharing information. I'm going to share my screen. We've got, here we all are. This was us back in June of last year. This was a section of the group that came together to say, how can we use modeling and simulation for to speed up the industry for a pre-competitive platform. And platform, okay, interesting word. So here's some of the fundamental ways that we've been thinking about the CMMC. So our relationship with information, with content, with science is changing. We're moving from an analog world to a digital world, and finally into this platform world over the last 10, 15 years that we're all seeing really the rise of. But there's another level beyond that, which is the ecosystem. What a platform does is it brings together all this disparate knowledge, all of these silos of information, and it unites them together in a way that allows us to create tools, for example, that can leverage all of that information in new ways. We're moving on now to an ecosystem approach. And why is that important? Well, at each step of the way, access to knowledge increases exponentially. And when access to knowledge increases and more people can get involved and unite those disparate pieces of knowledge, then emergent solutions can begin to arise for very complex challenges. The more we shift into an ecosystem way of thinking and operating, and the more our tools can support that, then the greater challenges that we can take on. Because ecosystems are more diverse, they get more diverse over time, they are resilient, they can leverage a number of different solutions, and they can rapidly reorganize in the face of change. And that's absolutely what we need in our world today. So how can science how can we create ecosystems where science and our solutions and our collaborations can radically reorganize to tackle challenges and problems as they emerge at a different level of scale? That's what we're trying to accomplish, partly with CMMC. We're moving from a competitive siloed pipeline world into something that's more collaborative and connected. And the more connected we become, the bigger challenges we can take on. So the CMMC is this cloud in the center of this picture. What this is a systems diagram that describes the beneficial, virtuous loop that we're trying to create with the CMMC. Our purpose at the top is to grow the cultivated meat market so that the deleterious effects of factory farms are reduced. We can do that by bringing modeling and simulation into direct contact with the industry, providing tools that'll help people tackle the challenges that are preventing them currently from getting to market, and optimizing to make those solutions much more palatable and cheaper and faster. And so what we're trying to do is bring together as diverse a group as we can, uniting many, many different interests, people who have different organizational structures themselves, different funding sources, different needs, individuals, businesses, researchers, academic institutions, and creating a space where what we create together can be shared free for non-commercial purposes. Because the industry is relying very much on new research. We're generating new knowledge. So if we can generate tools that can speed up researchers and academics' ability to bring new knowledge to bear on these challenges in the industry, then we're speeding up this loop. And we also maintain the ability to commercialize it, so that for those who can pay for tools or need something that's more specific and targeted, we can do that. So part of what we're trying to do is build these pre-competitive platforms that'll support as many people as possible, and giving the product of that development cycle to people who can use that knowledge, generate new knowledge. But then also being able to stack on top of that pre-competitive platform very specific solutions to problems that maybe one or two more people have. So in that way, we're trying to unite both the individual pipeline competitive focus, making sure that we're supporting that because it's a reality of our world, and we need to do that, with the need for this more collaborative, emergent structure. So we're trying to do a lot. We're trying to accomplish a lot. My friend Jaro is going to take us through one of the examples of how, when you bring together really diverse people who have expertise in different areas, and you unleash them to play together, then they can create something that is really significant. In this case, we've got some folks who are world-class experts with agent-based modeling. We have some industry partners who have some significant issues and challenges they're trying to address. And we have some experts with computational fluid dynamics who are all coming together. And along with bioreactor designers, novel designers, et cetera, to create a new tool that we think is pretty special. So I'll have Jaro share that with you now.
All right, thanks, Chris. So I'm Jaro Camphuijsen from the Netherlands eScience Center in Amsterdam. And I'll guide you through the actual modeling work we did. So I'll share my screen here. And if you remember this slide by Simon at the start of the presentation, you can remember this modeling loop we had with these two actually inner loops, one on the science side and one on the engineering side. And I'll use that figure again to describe what we have been doing and what we will do in the future. So for the past few months, we have been working on a proof of concept, which was funded by Merck. And this proof of concept was actually an implementation of this whole double loop, but a very quick one when we really did the minimal effort we could to show this methodology works. Currently, we're working on a multi-scale whole system modeling of bioreactors, and in this this project that was funded by the Good Food Institute, we're really focusing on the lower left half of this figure, the science side. We really want to get the science done and ready before we can start the actual engineering, which is the future that we have in mind. So then we will apply our model and run simulations to actually optimize bioreactors and bioprocesses. And once we start doing that, of course, the whole science loop will keep on going, and we will stay in this double loop. So one thing that we identified, and when we started on this proof of concept model a few months ago, is the dilemma of scale up. So to actually scale up production of cultivated meat, we need to produce a lot of biomass. So we need to scale up our bioreactor to produce this amount of mass. But the scale up of bioreactors induces that we need forceful mixing. We need to have the whole bioreactor mixed to have well-mixed media. And this well-mixed media, that will actually result in biomass growth. And if we have a large bioreactor, we have a lot of biomass growth. However, this forceful mixing also induces physical stress on these cells. And in particular for these animal cells, this physical stress is detrimental, and we will reduce the biomass growth. So these two processes, they inhibit each other. So we want to find a way around this, to have a well-mixed media on the one hand and reduce the physical stress on these cells on the other hand. And for that, we can apply modeling. But first, we need to really understand what's happening in these bioreactors. So we took the simplest of possible bioreactors that's ubiquitous in science and in engineering. And this is the stir tank bioreactor. So you see one here on the left. This is a really simple model. A really simple geometry to model. And we had the simplest of impellers, which is just a rod rotating. And for this this combination of mechanisms, so we have the cells growing and the stress on these cells, we need to apply a multi-scale model and actually model the whole system. So we want to model the fluid dynamics, which you see in the middle figure. So the actual fluid speed that was induced by the impeller that rotates. And we want to model the actual cells on the microcarrier that feel this fluid flow and experience a certain stress because of that. Besides the stress of the fluid flow, they also experience stress because of each other's presence and because they push to each other on the microcarrier. These cells on this microcarrier, they can proliferate and they will do so if they grow large enough in an amount of time. So this was our initial proof of concept model where we had this stress modeled, and you see the stress is shown as a red color on the cells. And this stress actually inhibits the proliferation. So if a cell experiences a lot of stress, it stops proliferating. So how this was implemented, we have this information that we get from the actual experimental setup. So we have on the top in the green cells, you see the bioreactor geometry. And this actual bioreactor geometry, this stir tank bioreactor, this informs our computational fluid dynamics model. So this is the fluid flow in the bioreactor type of model. So this model, which is run in COMSOL, which is a physical modeling platform, this fluid field is then passed to our agent-based model, which is the model that you saw with the microcarrier and the cells on it. And this model, in turn, is informed by the cell biomechanics that we know. So, for example, the proliferation rate of these cells, the size of these cells, how they grow and how they experience stress. And all these parameters are also passed to the agent-based model, so the cell model. And together with the fluid velocity field that was modeled in the other model, we produce well, these cell and microcarrier counts. So over time, you get data on how many cells there are per microcarrier, the position of these cells, and the stresses they experience. And we pass all this data to an interactive visualization application in Unity. And this is the actual application that you can see and use on the website, the CMMC.org, and which looks like this. So here you see the actual bioreactor in a simplified form. So it's just a cylinder with a little, oh, that doesn't work. Let's see if I can go back. Can we play this video? Yes, we can. So you see the rod rotating in the middle. This is just the impeller that starts to speed up the fluid in the bioreactor. You can zoom in. You can do this all by yourself on the website, just to experiment a bit with how this looks. And you can start to see the little microcarriers that flow around in the fluid in the bioreactor. And on top of all of these microcarriers, you see these little cells. And as you zoom in on one of them, you see the cells experience different amount of stress at a certain time. You also see them proliferating. So they divide, and here you see the whole bioreactor again. So these cells, they experience the fluid flow through the impeller. And that's how they experience stress. And that is, again, influencing how they proliferate and how they grow on the microcarriers. So here are the results of our initial simulations. So we ran the model for different stir speeds. And I think the main thing we got from these results were a lot of questions. And that's exactly what we, well, maybe not exactly, but that was what we have in mind if we look at this inner loop of the scientific modeling cycle. Because we put in data, we put in scientific understanding, we model it, and we get a result which does or does not correspond to experimental results. And most of the time it doesn't. And that's actually the interesting part, because if it doesn't, it means our model is not complete or wrong. And then we need to find out what's wrong, what's not complete, what do we need to add to actually get the experimental results. So some of the questions that we got from this simulation was, for example, what are the relative contributions to lower the total cell count of slow proliferation and cell death? So how many of the cells do actually die, or how many are just slowly proliferating? And what mechanisms are behind both of these causes? So what causes cells to die? What causes them to proliferate slower? And which of these mechanisms is most important? And how can we minimize the effect of the most important mechanisms? And if you start to answer these questions, which we can start answering if we continue this loop of modeling and gathering experimental data, then we can start to optimize bioreactors, which is turning into the engineering loop, which is the upper right corner of the image that Simon showed. So we can apply a model to design, for example, tank and rotor geometries. Because with what kind of rotor geometry do you minimize the stress on these cells, but maximize or optimize the stirring, the mixing, so that all cells have enough nutrients and oxygen, but do not experience any stress. But also, what kind of microcarrier shapes can you think of that might reduce the stress or might enhance the growth of these cells? Maybe the spherical microcarriers that we all know are not the best shape. And what kind of knobs and buttons do you need to turn and push in this bioprocess? So do you need to increase the stir speed at a certain moment, or just slow it down, or do you add more oxygen at a certain point in time? Do we add more nutrients, or do we need to add more microcarriers at a certain point? All of these kinds of questions you can run in a model, which is way cheaper than do it in structured experiments. If you want to test all of these cases in experiments, it's going to cost lots of money and time. And also, of course, the scale. How large can you make your bioreactor with all of these different settings? And how can this all be optimized for large capacity bioreactors? So that was all the POC with a little look forward. Currently, we're working on the Good Food Institute research grant that we got. And in this grant, we are aiming to use this model and make this more biologically sound. So have more of the biological processes in the cells, but also apply the model to different types of bioreactors. For example, the rocking bioreactor that is used by, for example, Celtainer. And all of these listed partners are also working together with us on the grant. And also the hollow fiber bioreactor that's used, for example, by the University of Bath, by Dr. Marjane Ellis, and the continuous bioreactor by Cellular Revolution. So all of these bioreactors are totally different than the stir tank bioreactor that we used to model for our proof of concept. But the biology and the physics is completely the same. So our model should work as well in these bioreactors. So we want to apply our model, improve it, and apply it to these 3 different kinds of bioreactors to see how we can optimize them for cell growth. So this was all about bioreactors and how we can optimize bioreactors, but modeling can have an impact on all kinds of different parts of the whole cultivated meat sector. So for example, media optimization. We can think of molecular models, how molecules bind to proteins or to cells, growth of tissue and scaffolds. And for example, high density bioreactor efficiency, which we already talked about a lot, but also economic modeling, which is a big field in computational modeling. And all of this modeling can be used for engineering and actually optimizing processes, but it's also a very actionable encapsulation of knowledge, because everything you know, you put into this model in a way that you can experiment with it and really understand what's happening in the system. So I've come to the end of this presentation, and I just want to press. We are a consortium, the Cultivated Meat Modeling Consortium, and the only thing that drives us is people. We really need people that want to contribute, that want to help, that want to work on this together. And as we enter our 2nd year, we really want to formalize and grow and take on more ambitious goals. So what does this mean for you? Well, you can visit our website on www.thecmmc.org, and you can try out the demo that we just showed, or you can read our white paper and the in-depth scientific report, which is also there. You can learn more about our purpose and our partners that we work with, or that work with us. And you can visit our contact page, where you can receive a link to our monthly welcome call for prospective or new members. And the next one is October 29th, so try to be there. And you can get connected to the members of our working group, which is the group of people that are governing the CMMC at the moment, or at least trying to think about how to take this further. So thank you for this, and have a nice day.